Hi, my name is Sara Dorr, and I'm doing my podcast on Diego Rivera and the muralist movement of Mexico. To give a little background history, the Mexican Revolution started in 1910, and it went through, the military phase of this revolution went through the 1920s, and then it went into the institutional phase. And that's where the Mexican muralist movement took place, is in the 1920s. And it lasted through the 1980s. In 20th century Mexico, a tremendous amount of arts and cultures were created. From 1921 to 1924, Jose Vasconcelos was the Minister of Education under President Alvaro Obregón. Vasconcelos knew that Diego Rivera had been studying art with a Mexican scholarship in Europe for years since he was in high school. And he was on a scholarship from the Mexican government. And that was mostly through the military phase of the revolution. According to Pete Hamill in the book Diego Rivera, Vasconcelos had great ambitions for the people of his country. Most people in Mexico at this time were illiterate and poor and didn't have good sewage or good housing or anything like that. And Vasconcelos thought that an illiterate people would always be enslaved. So he wanted to change that. He was quoted in Hamill's book as saying, "We are small, but we must perpetuate ourselves in large works." Vasconcelos wanted to teach Mexicans to read through art. He wanted to create a Mexican Renaissance similar to the Italian Renaissance. He wanted public buildings to be adorned with murals, and he wanted everyone from the elite to the poverty-stricken to be able to see these murals. And he wanted them to learn what it meant to be Mexican from these murals. Rivera returned to Mexico in 1920, and he began the Mexican muralist movement. He was open to many, many criticisms by the Mexican elite and the poverty-stricken too, because he was not around during the revolution. So he left again and went back to Italy to study the frescoes of the Renaissance. And he stayed there for about half a year, and he came back, and then he traveled to the Yucatan, and he went all over Mexico and met people that lived there and saw the poverty and saw how most of the people were living. Vasconcelos wanted Mexico to have its own artistic renaissance, just like in Italy. So upon Rivera's return, he asked him to start creating murals. And in the book, The Fabulous Life of Diego Rivera, Wolf writes, "In March of 1923, Rivera began the first of his great works, a series of 124 frescoes on the corridor walls of a spacious courtyard, 3 stories high and 2 city blocks long and 1 block wide. The patio of the Ministry of Public Education. Rivera decorated all 4 sides and on all 3 floors except for 3 panels on the ground floor and a section on the second floor on which the shields of the Mexican states have been emblazed by other painters. This task took Rivera 4 years and 3 months of intensive and intermittent labor. Diego also completed 30 frescoes at the agricultural school in Chapingo. In both places, all the actual painting was done entirely by Diego. It was in the series in the education building that made the Mexican art movement suddenly known throughout America and through Europe. It made the name of Diego Rivera very well known and famous throughout the Western world. This revivement of the murals would start in Mexico, and then it would move into the United States very quickly. In the book Diego Rivera by Pete Hamill, he states that the murals in the Ministry of Education make up a visual ballad of Mexico, resembling the traditional corridor, a narrative and song. The first floor panels express the pain associated with being a Mexican worker, either working for a hacienda owner or an owner of a mine. They show the pain of exploitation. And then the other side shows the joy of being a Mexican. So it shows they're very colorful. There's a lot of emotion on that side, a lot of music, a lot of dance, and festivals such as the Day of the Dead festival. These two strong emotions of joy and pain hold tension through the 128 panels. The third floor of the building has urban and rural people marching together to paradise underneath the communist red flags. Diego had the power to combine everyone in his new vision of Mexico. By the time that the building was finished, after 4 years and 3 months, some of the people in Mexico, especially elites and some of the people in the government, started to say that Diego's work began to look like propaganda, and hence it could not be art. So the government was now saying that these paintings could be perceived as degrading to Mexico, degrading to their society because it only represented the lower class and the workers and the laborers and the peons and the Indians, and they called it the dregs of society. They made up a new word for his paintings called uglyism, or fiismo. There was talk by some of the elite to destroy these murals and put up more beautiful works, pictures of the elites and the hacienda owners, and things that were prettier. But also at this time, the muralism movement had really taken off in America. It had spread to art critics of New York and in Paris too. And they began to arrive in Mexico and to praise the murals, and enthusiastic articles started to be written about Diego and his murals. He was suddenly realized as one of the biggest attractions in Mexico. After this time, Rivera began to move his murals into the United States. He created works in California, he created works in Detroit and in New York. In New York, he was the second artist asked to have his own show at the Museum of Modern Art. Rivera's works provided monumental historical narratives, and in the 3 main works that he shows in the Museum of Modern Art, Rivera touches on Mexican power relationships seen through a revolutionary frame. As Leah Dickerman points out in Diego Rivera's murals for the Museum of Modern Art, these images offer commentary on the recent events of the Mexican Revolution in a systematic way. The first concern is the abuses of colonial labor. The second concern is the sacrifice and the endurance of the revolutionaries in the years of fighting. And the third, of the revolutionary leader and the victory of the revolution. In the end, Diego Rivera made spectacular achievements with his life. He not only revived the fresco style in Mexico, but he created a very strong muralist movement that moved into the United States and into Paris and into Europe. He became a voice for the common people, for the laborers, and for peasants. And he changed the lives of many people through his art. Thank you very much.